Well, I want to welcome you everybody to this week's episode of the CVC Home Service Success Network. And every week, I try to come up with a topic that people can find useful. And it hit me the other day about what I wanted to talk about this week, which was what is your playbook? Because the playbook is not motivation, it's not wishful thinking, it's not luck. If you look at it, every time there's a sports team they go to play, they got a playbook they're going by. Race teams, they have a playbook they're going by for every single racetrack. In fact, there's a big lawsuit right now in NASCAR because somebody quit and they're saying he took the playbook with him. So there's a big thing going on, a big stink in the racing industry over this because the playbook got taken away. You see, if you're a profitable company, you don't operate on emotion, or you shouldn't. Successful companies that operate on systems, standards, leadership, execution. If you see companies that struggle every year, they're usually reacting to problems. But the companies that have a proven business plan, they seem to to dominate the market. So today, do you have a business plan? Or are you just winging it? You know, if your company depends on the owner solving problems every day, you don't have a scalable business and you have a stressful job. It's like one of the things that makes the most valuable company for anyone to own is a company where you're not needed. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to walk through the core components of a successful home service business playbook. The blueprint for growth, profitability, leadership, culture, and long term. So, Josh, when I sent you today's script and suggested topic, what was your thoughts on the playbook?
Well, how do you disseminate the playbook? That was my number one. How is this getting passed around? Is it a physical thing? And then how often are you reviewing it? Those were
Right.
my two big thoughts right there.
Well, one is it's got to be a physical thing. If it's just in your head, then nobody's going to follow. It's just like building systems, Josh. You've built systems for years, and they're all written down and they're all there where other people can find them when you disappear. So, Cheryl, what's your thoughts on today's topic?
Well, my main thought is exactly what you just said. People have to follow it. I mean, a playbook's not worth the paper it's written on if you're not, or the internet, wherever you've got it. It's not worth the paper it's written on unless you're going to follow it. If you write it and you put it over in the corner and you assume, it's not going to do you a bit of good.
Yeah. So, Josh, to answer your question, it's a documented strategy of how your company operates. It defines how you market, how you answer phones, how you sell, how you serve your customers. How do you hire? How do you lean? How do you train? How do you manage your money? And how do you create profit? You know, professional sports teams, they all have playbooks. Military organizations, they have playbooks, very intensive playbooks. Highly successful businesses, they have playbooks. And if you don't have one, your employees are going to create their own rules. They're not going to understand what their benefits are. They're not going to understand what funeral leave is, PTO, or anything else. And the result is profits start to shrink and chaos grows. If there's a question about the business, to be honest with you, the playbook should answer it because it's going to address how do we consistently win? Not once, not by accident, but rather consistently. So does that answer your question, Josh?
It does. I mean, there's a lot of deep dives down into that. You know, where do you start? What would be, if you're starting today, Jerry, what would be your very first thing you would do? What would be page one?
Page one is the vision, and that's what I'm getting ready to go in next. What is the vision? Because the business has got to have a vision, and if your employees don't know what the vision is, They don't have any idea where you're going. And that's what I often find when I do an on-site analysis. The employees don't know where the business is going. They don't know what that owner's vision is. And sometimes the owner's vision is so fragmented and changing all the time that they're very uncertain where the business is going to. Cheryl, what about you? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, the thing about it is, as I would think, you said the vision. I think somewhere you got to sit down, and I'm looking at your vision as a mind map. I think that's what you have to do. You have to get kind of like a chapter or your list of what you've got to get. Then, as Josh said, where do you start? You start with the one thing that's the most important, and then you work your way through, because until it's done, you're not going to have you're going to have holes left in it. But at least if you can start on it and get everything that's totally pertinent in there, the things that'll change the whole business if something happens. I think that's, to me, that's your vision. That's how you get started.
Right. That vision is going to be, what is the kind of company you want to build? You got to define, what is your culture going to look like? What type of reputation do you want? What's the financial goals you're pursuing? And what lifestyle are you creating, not only for yourself, but for everybody that works for you? A lot of people struggle because they only look at surviving and they focus on surviving this week. But if you've actually got the right vision, you're thinking 3 years ahead, 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. And you're asking yourself, are we building a company that depends on me? Or are we building an asset that can grow beyond me? And also, are you building an asset that there may come a day that you decide to depart from that company and sell it? Is someone going to be able to see your vision and buy into it? Because whenever you create the vision, this creates the alignment that you need. Your team's going to need to know, and you answer this in your playbook. What does winning look like for us? What standards matter and why do they matter? And what's the purpose for why this company even exists? Because one thing's for sure, your people are going to work harder if there's a purpose than they're going to do with that thing that starts with a P called a paycheck. There's got to be a vision, and there's got to be something that you're doing that's making a difference. So back to you, Cheryl, your time.
Looking at this, I think you have to be a very transparent person. If you're an owner that's not transparent, this will never work for you because you'll never share it with your people. And I think that's where a lot of business owners may have the hard time. It's hard for them to let go of the details that they might think somebody shouldn't know. But if you're going to do a playbook, your players have to also read the book and understand and know exactly what's going on in the business. And I think unless somebody is ready to be transparent, I don't know if you'd ever complete one.
Yeah. Josh, what about you?
I was going to say weekly reviews of the different parts of the playbook, SOPs, and pick one a week to read with your team. It does two things. A, it makes sure if you need the feedback to make sure that this is the way it's supposed to be done. And B, that what you wrote makes sense.
Right. And the next part of that playbook is the part we call operations, because this is where your revenue is produced. This is where your profits are made or they are destroyed. Because if you're going to have a successful company, you've got to have operational standards. And those standards have to keep changing with just like technology changes. You've got to have service procedures, inspection procedures, safety procedures, customer communication standards, truck organization, job documentation, follow-up systems. Your goal in a playbook is consistency. Because every time you do business with somebody, your customer expects and deserves an excellent experience every single time. This is all going to depend which technician shows up, who answers the phone, or what mood someone is in all too often, because it shouldn't make any difference which one of the technicians shows up, or who answers the phone, or what kind of mood people are in the day. You see, your systems create your reputation. Operational excellence means fewer mistakes, higher efficiency, better reviews, better referrals, and higher profitability. Often what happens is, and we see it real common out here today, is people, managers, they tolerate inconsistency because they feel handcuffed because it's so hard to find new people. Average companies, they manage personalities. Great companies, they manage systems. So, Cheryl, that should hit you right between the eyes because you deal with people that are hiring out of desperation. So, what's your thought about what I just said?
Hey, I agree. And that's the problem. If you've got to wait, if you're at the 11th hour before you start doing something, it turmoils the business and it throws all your systems out of whack because you don't have the control over them. And there, within that, I think this is where a company's got to allot the time to do this. And I can't even fathom how much time it would take if you had to start a brand new business and pull this up. Many of your clients already have the SOPs. They have a lot of things that they need, but many companies are by hearing this, I think are going to get really overwhelmed because they're sitting there wondering, how do I do this and do my job too?
Very true. So, Josh, you heard me talk about systems, and that's something we both believe heavily in and have worked heavily. So, what
Mhm.
caught your attention to what I just went over?
Um, well, I mean, one Cheryl just said most people have them. I would say most people don't have them. I would argue the other way. Most people get frustrated with writing them. Today's world, it should be a lot easier to write them. You should be able to throw it into an AI program, tell it what you want, and spit out a sample, at least a sample something that you can edit or work with from there. If it's, I mean, I was working on an FAQ just for flashing, and it'll tell you how to install flashing if you really want to. That was a 4-page document it spit out in 2 minutes that needed about an hour of editing, but it got me to where I needed to be with it.
And it
So,
does. And you just mentioned something that helps tremendously, and that is the use of artificial intelligence today and using that technology to help you in developing these systems and developing this playbook. AI is a tremendous tool if properly used. Now, the next section you got to have in your playbook is sales because you got to be able to sell your product or your services. Many times people hate the word sales. And we have technicians that hate being called salespeople and don't want to be salespeople. It's a real problem there. You go out in the field and people are missing excellent opportunities that are right in front of them. But the companies that make strong profits, they understand technical skill alone does not create growth. You got to have your communication skills. In this world we operate in, you got to have inspection skills. You got to be able to present it to customers and have the skill of doing that and being able to develop customer trust and building a relationship with them. If you've got a strong sales playbook, it's going to include how technicians educate their customers. In fact, that's one of the courses I'm presenting now, how to turn a technician into a trusted advisor, how their opinions and options are presented, how the estimates are structured, and how follow ups happen. Right now, we're working on using AI to assist us in the presentation method, developing ways of images that can show the customer quite clearly what the problem is. Not only that, we can show them what the finished results are going to look like. You know, Profitable companies are not always the cheapest, but they are the companies that create the most trust. Customers buy confidence. Your team must learn how to communicate value, how to explain problems clearly, and how to recommend solutions professionally. A tech that you have that only cleans or repairs, they're going to be limited in what they can provide for you. But a technician that educates the customer, becomes that trusted advisor, and builds trust, they're going to create growth for your company. They're going to create growth. Revenue growth, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we have intentional training and consistent execution of the processes. So, Josh, go back to you this time. You've been out on some trucks lately. You're seeing somehow people operating there. You're seeing the mistakes that people make that we're having to work with these people. What's your thoughts on what I just said?
Well, it can be, you can have them just on how to just for the different personality types that are dealing with customers. If you have the quote unquote, I saw the follower recently, the guy who just follows you around everywhere you go. And what it does is throws you off, right? Like it throws you off your rhythm, that sort of stuff. I gave some tips on how to deal with that personality type. It's like, look, here's what I'm going to, tell them what you're going to do, explain what you're going to do. So now I'm going to go around, I'm going to take photos. I'm going to go back in the truck, and then I'm going to write up my inspection reports and any estimates, talk to the office, make sure I have, my bases covered if there's anything I have questions on. And doing that, it puts them kind of like, okay, they know what's going on because they're very curious about the process, and lets you keep control of the conversation. Because those types of people will you'll start missing stuff if you're constantly having to interact with the homeowner while you're doing your inspection. So having little things like that make a big difference. Also practicing. I've seen them talk over the customers. Customer asked a question, and they didn't even stop. So practicing talking to customers is very super uncomfortable, but does work.
Very much so. That goes back to the empathy we can show customers, and we've got to be able to listen to customers. So, Cheryl, what's your thoughts on the part I just talked about?
Well, I always say communication's 95% of all the problems. But the thing about it is, I believe that the technicians need to be trained that the customer is one of the most important things they have, and the retained customer is more important than a new customer because they are your salesman. You've always taught that if you can do great for a customer, they'll sell your business for you. And so I think that's where it goes. And Josh, just so I can tell you misunderstood me, I said Jerry's clients, you and him had helped them get their SOPs.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's a lot of the problem is the guys don't feel comfortable. I just had one the other week put in his notice because he didn't want to sell while he was out there for a company. And so he just wants to work. And it's hard to have a technician that does that. And I think that's where the training has to be done early in the game. Your playbook has to show it. They have to understand it. And they got to understand how important they are to the business if they do, or how unimportant they are if they don't sell.
Yep. So, and then it's all about your people. You got to have the part of the playbook about the people, because here's something that every owner, every manager will understand. You eventually learn this, and that is the business will never outperform your people. The quality of your company is going to determine, the quality of your team. I said that wrong. The quality of your team determines the quality of your company. So you've got to include things like your hiring standards, your onboarding systems. We've talked about that so many times. Training systems, accountability, leadership development, and the culture of the company. You can't build a company that's elite with very low standards. are standards that are not held accountable. The great companies that are out here, they're intentional about who they hire, who they tolerate, who they develop. And they also understand that if they have one toxic employee, it's going to take morale down. Customer experience is going to suffer, and profitability is going to be gone. Your company culture, it's either happening by design or by default. And your culture is not a slogan on the wall. Culture is what your team members experience and demonstrate every single day. And culture comes from the leadership, the accountability, the communication, and the standards. Because if you run a successful company, you need to be building a team of leaders, not a team of followers. Cheryl, back to you. Your thoughts there.
Well, everybody seems to hire fast and fire slow. But what you need to do is hire slow. Find the person that fits your company before you put them in there. And then if they don't work, fire fast. Because like you said, a bad apple messes the whole tree up. So I think that's where we missed the boat, and the culture that's got to be so important lately. Years ago, it didn't seem to matter quite as much. You got up, you went to work, and you did it. But now the generations have changed, and they're looking for more time for themselves. They're looking for better work ethics. They're looking for a lot of things. The problem is you've got to give that to them, but then you've got to make sure that they pull their weight and give you what you need. And if you can hire that right person in the beginning and not have to work with them for days and days just to make them fit, it's a big difference. And they're the ones that you're going to retain.
And I'm going to throw this in. You also have what we call energy vampires. And this is an employee that is robbing the energy out of your company because of his personal culture and the way he operates. So, Josh, your thoughts on this segment?
Well, I was going to ask about employees at failure to launch. Guys who you bring in to be technicians, they're helpers for a while, but then they fail to launch. Meaning they just don't take the steps to improve or, just be more than what they were on the day in. How do you, in your playbook, put that in? What do you do there to get them to the next level or move them out the space they're taking?
And that's where it comes down to accountability. One of the quotes I've often used, and Cheryl and Brandy used to hate me saying this, but using the Barney Fife philosophy, you got to nip the problems in the bud. If you don't nip the problems in the bud, they're just going to magnify and get worse. If you have someone that's late to work, unless you hold this person accountable the very first time, they're going to develop a habit, and breaking habits gets really hard. So you've got to be on this. You've got to set up your education for these guys and the gals and what they're going to follow. It's like yesterday, I was talking to a client and went and checked some of his newer employees. Found out, and we looked at it, how long it had been since the last time they were on the online learning platform. And it had been too long. Another client, we've got a certification test coming up next month. And all of them have been told, you need to study these courses. So when I go look at it, guess what? Nobody is doing any research whatsoever. And if they don't get their act together, they're doomed to fail that certification course, which is going to be a disappointment for them and a very hefty cost to the employer for the fees he's going to be paying when the guys and gals failed the certification test. But it also goes into the next part, which is the financial management, the financial part of the playbook. And this is where a lot of people, they just avoid this. They just don't want to look at it. They may look at a checking account balance, but they're not really looking at their KPIs. They got to find out, where is the revenue coming from? Because revenue is everything. Cash is king. But profit is what's going to create the freedom and the value in the business. Right now, let's get real. We've got private equity that's buying home service companies everywhere they can get their hands in, but they're setting the value on something called EBITDA. They don't look at the checkbook balance. They're looking at what the EBITDA of the company is. Many times we see companies are working their tails off, but they're broke. They don't have the funding to do what they need to do. So, a strong financial playbook includes budgeting, pricing strategy, labor percentages, overhead control, marketing ROI, cash flow management, profit planning. All these things come into play. You got to know your numbers. You can't guess at them. So successful owners, managers, what are they going to do? They've got their KPIs they check on a regular basis. Maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's weekly, maybe it's daily. The margins, is your margins correct? Average tickets coming in, closing rates. What percentage of the calls that come to your office are converted to actual appointments? How many proposals are being prepared, and what's the acceptance rate? How often are you getting callbacks? What's the percentage of people you have to make an unprofitable return call out there? And what marketing performance is paying? Which one has the ROI? You got to delve deep. If you don't understand your numbers, it's impossible to properly lead your company. Profit is not evil. It is not a sin. We are in a capitalistic society. That's what we do. We are in business for profit. Profit is where the value of your company's at. And without profit, you're only running a job. You're not running a business, because profit's going to allow you to have growth, allow you to hire people to do the training you need, to buy the better equipment that's needed, and gives you long-term stability and helps you get through the low periods of the season, what the HVAC industry calls the shoulder season. So I'm going to go to Josh. Josh, if I'm not mistaken, you have an accounting degree. So we're going to go to you first for what's your thoughts on the financial management side, the things I just went over there?
Well, knowing what your job costs actually are is going to be a huge one, because you may think you may have this huge job on the books, but in reality, the profit is wrong. And knowing what it actually, the number of hours it goes into, because I used to have someone, and he told me what he was charging for prefab swap outs, and he told me the number, and I said, do you know what the amount of building materials you have to have, that dollar amount is on the truck that you can't charge for, between 2x4s, things like that? And he said no. I said, it's I gave him a number, and because I had calculated it, and I said, do you know that you're losing money on every install? And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, yeah, you'd be better off. I said, think about it. Time you pay your insurance, add this up in your head. How much is your insurance? Health, auto, building, the travel, wages. I said, you've actually lost money when whatever slim profit you thought you were making, you're actually upside down by doing this service at this price. And unfortunately, they're not here anymore for that reason. They never grew. So if you're not actually doing your job costing to see, what does this actually take, then how you can't actually figure out what you're actually supposed to be charging.
Very
and
true.
part of that is, what is your average callback? Like, what does that average callback rate look like? And why? And the other thing is drilling down why you're getting callbacks. It used to be on pellet stoves, it was lack of training. The homeowner, you'd go and you'd give them a 10-minute rundown of the stove, and out of a 10-minute rundown, how many things, out of, let's just say 30 bullet points, Jerry, how many things do you think they would remember?
Yeah,
Probably.
If they remembered 40%, it would be good.
Exactly. So, we have a client, and I made a brochure, a flyer, and they can send out for gas customers that cut callbacks down 60%, just by giving them links to do some research. So if you're having, callbacks need to be figured into your job costing. If you figured, each customer out of 4 installs you're installing, you have 1 callback for nonsensical BS. No matter what you do, that needs to be figured into your job costing. That does cost money.
Yeah. Gerald, your thoughts?
Well, we're talking about keeping the records and things. When back when we started in a few years ago, you know how that goes. All of our books were done with pen and pencil and paper, and you had to figure it out as you go. And you made a lot of mistakes because the calculator didn't work right or your mind wasn't working right. Now bookkeeping is just a matter of putting it in and it does it. And then on top of that, you have people that your CFO, the people out there that can do it. You find a good person to do the input. You find somebody to read it, because most business owners don't, like Josh, he had a degree. It was easy for him to understand. Most business owners don't have a clue when they start into a business exactly what they need to know. And then once you know it, how do you put it together to come out with the numbers you need? So I think finding a good person to help you with that, and someone to put it together and show you the paperwork of this is where you're at and this is where you're going to go, or this is where you're going to lose.
Yep. And so the next part of the playbook, it's what your marketing's going to be, because you got to market what you do, or you're going to be operating in the Sahara Desert. The best service companies in town still fails if nobody knows they exist. You can have great talent, great skills, but if nobody knows you're there, how are they going to know to buy you? So in today's world, marketing is about reputation, visibility, trust, and consistency. You got to develop a marketing strategy, and it's got to include your Google reviews, your Yelp reviews, your website presence, your SEO, your search engine optimization, social media, your referral systems, email marketing, and community visibility. How are you being seen? Simple matter of, what do your service trucks look like? Are they plain white wrappers with a little bitty magnetic sign on the side? Or are they true rolling billboards going down the highways of your market areas? Successful companies stay visible, and they are very visible year round. Many companies are spending a fortune these days rebranding their companies to get better visibility, but it's paying off for them because they're watching their businesses grow and their profits grow. Many companies, they disappear during slow seasons, but actually they often create their own slow seasons because they're not following the playbook, or they don't have one. So Josh, your turn again. Your thoughts?
So marketing calendars are going to be the big one. Because what you call the shoulder season,
Yes.
we know when the slowdowns are going to be every single year. We also know what the calls are going to be for during certain weather events. So what do you have queued up? What is your marketing plan for, let's just say, Memorial Day weekend? What is your plan for 4th of July? Do you have a special? Do you have an offer? Is there, off season? Do you have a marketing campaign to reach out to old customers every off season? What does that look like each time for you? Because having that plan in place, it's agonizingly painful to put together. I can tell you that. I can promise you that. But it'll set you up for success for the entire year. Because from there, then you'll build your marketing budget, and go from there.
That's it. Cheryl, your thoughts on the marketing part of the playbook?
I personally think you need to have a secondary playbook on just marketing, because what I see a lot of times, there's so many companies, the only time they market's when they're desperate. They've got their web page, but as far as aggressive marketing like Josh was just talking about, the only time they do it's when they're desperate. They wait, they don't keep their presence out there year round. They wait till they need money. They start fidgeting, trying to get ads up, trying to get this up and get everything going. And I think that is the bigger of the problems, instead of just, as Josh did, have it ready to go and keep it consistent with the years and with the changing of the years, because seasons are not the same now. But I've been watching some marketing following the old season that we used to have. And I think you just need to pay attention to when you really need it the most, but you've got to have it, I say 12 months out of the year, if you're going to be an aggressive growing company.
Right. Because your people are still wanting to get paid. They still need their paychecks, all that. And to do that, you've got to keep the trucks rolling. You've got to keep the phone ringing. So marketing is a key part of the whole thing. But then here's another section that we need to go into, because it all falls back to the leadership. Leadership is what's going to hold the whole operation together. You're going to set the tone for your business as that leader. Leaders create momentum. You look at it, look back in football. Vince Lombardi, Green Bay Packers. He wasn't well liked, but he was highly respected, and he built winners. Joe Gibbs, same thing. He was a successful leader in the NFL. Today, he's an extremely successful leader in the world of NASCAR. Your team watches your consistency, your attitude, your standards, and your personal discipline. You know, if you're the leader, you got to make the difficult decisions. You got to protect the standards of the company. You have to develop your people and hold them accountable. And you've got to stay focused on the long-term goals. If you've got weak leadership, you're going to create confusion. No doubt about it. Chaos is going to ensue. Strong leadership, that's what creates clarity in the company. And remember this, your team will not rise above the example that you set as the leader. So Cheryl, your turn now. What do you think?
And you need to hire other leaders comparable to your means. I mean, try to find someone like you, someone that has the same vision as you do, someone that's willing to implement your vision. They need to be an implementer so they can implement yours, but then they need to set the precedence for your employees. So I think, and you're always training leaders. I think people only train the one person that they're looking at as the leader at the moment, but you should progressively be looking for leaders out of your whole group of employees, because you're going to need somebody to move up to a different position one day. Don't wait till you're at the deadline. Train leaders as you go through.
Okay. Josh, your thoughts?
Is there a world where two Joshes can exist in the same room with the same personality, Jerry?
Say that,
Cheryl.
We just
Huh?
we just shoot one, I guess.
Well, Cheryl just said hire someone that has your same personality, and I was asking.
No, that's not what I said. I said they had the same vision.
Okay. I was going to say a different personality, because there's only room for one Jerry and one Josh in the room. There's not room for two.
I will verify that very completely.
There's not even room for you two in the same room, so not a problem.
You should have heard the cussing he gave me yesterday, Cheryl.
Well, it's what you did, Cheryl. I called him and he let someone else answer his phone and carried on a conversation with me.
Someone he knows very well.
Yeah, after I recognized the voice, I was like, you got to be kidding me. What did I just do this for? But anyway, so Josh, what's your closing thoughts on this? We're getting ready to end this. You got any closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say, you know, how are you going to implement each SOP, and then keep on implementing, and enforcing is going to be one of the biggest. And it's one thing. It's a lot of work to write the SOP, and it's a lot more work to implement it and then keep enforcement of the SOP, because employees are like kids, and you got to keep saying the same things over to them over and over and over and over, and enforcing, what you say there.
Yep, dead on the money. Cheryl, what would be your closing thoughts on today's topic of what is your playbook?
My main thing would be, if this is something you're going to do, don't just make it a project that you're going to do and you write it down and you're going to do it and you put it on the list of, I'm going to get this done, and 10 years later it's still on the I'm going to get this done list. Do it now.
Yeah. So here's my closing thoughts for you. If you're listening to us, and I hope you're there, let me leave you with this as a challenge. If somebody walked into your business today, right now, and say, show me your playbook for success, could you show them one? Could you clearly explain your systems, your culture, your standards, your goal, your financial plan, and your growth strategy? But the problem is most people have it right here. It's in their heads. And if something happens to you, that's going to die with you. That's the way it is. The companies that dominate business in the future in the home service industry will not be the companies that simply work harder. They're going to be the companies that build the systems, train the leaders, develop the teams, create consistency, and execute a clear, very precise playbook. Success is not random. Profit is not accidental. It doesn't just fall in your pocket. Growth is not magic. If you've got a winning company or you're planning to have one, you got to follow a plan. So let's put your plan together. And with that, I want to thank you for being with us today as part of the CVC Home Service Success Network. It's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's a pleasure to have you here each week. And with that, here's the challenge. Go build your playbook for success. We'll see you next week on the next episode of the CVC Home Service Success Network. Thank you for being here today, as always.